Before I start this video, I'd like to thank Danielle and Byron for being members of the channel. Feel free to sign up for the membership for uncensored extended content and first viewership before everyone else. Today we're going to North Dakota, Belcourt, North Dakota to be exact, where Savannah Marie Greywind was born on August 9th, 1995. A brief history on Savannah's upbringing. Her parents, Norberta and Joe, raised Savannah up until she was about 9 or 10 years old in Fargo, which is the largest city in North Dakota that runs along the Red River, which is a border between North Dakota and Minnesota. The Red River will be very significant later on in this story. As a young girl, Savannah and her family relocated to Spirit Lake. Here's where she stayed during her earlier school years, where she met her high school sweetheart as a freshman at Warwick, North Dakota High School, and his name is Ashton Matheny. A couple years after graduating from high school, Savannah obtained her CNA in 2014 and moved back to Fargo in 2016. Savannah had a very good head on her shoulders from young. She was driven and focused on her bright future a little more than the average adolescent. She began her career in the health field, working in a nursing home in a town that was once referred to as Devil's Lake, but is now known as Eventide. Not only was Savannah willing to help others and lend herself to her patients, but she was also very family oriented. And it was a cherry on top that her boyfriend, Ashton, was as well, because although young, they had plans on creating their own little family. And with the support of their loved ones, their picture-perfect dream family wasn't far-fetched at all. Savannah had a very tight-knit support system. Her big heart extended to her love for animals, wildlife, and children, especially her little niece and nephew, Odessa and Shane Jr. Now, with that brief background being said, you can imagine how happy both Savannah and Ashton were when at 21 years old, she found out that she was pregnant with their first child. Yes, it was finally happening for them. They were finally building the family they both intentionally set out to have. And thankfully, her family, whom she lived with, and relatives outside of her home were all in. Everyone was excited and filled with joy for the newest addition to their family. And later during the pregnancy is when they found out the baby was going to be a little girl. Now let's fast forward a bit to August of 2017. Savannah's 22nd birthday had already passed. Her belly is out to the center of the earth, 8 months pregnant when she and her family lived in the basement apartment of a 3-story, 7-unit housing complex at 2825 9th Street in Fargo, North Dakota. They lived downstairs from a couple, and the couple consisted of a woman named Brooklynn Cruz, 38 years old at the time, and her man, William Hain or Hone, don't really care if I'm butchering his name, and you'll find out why later. He was 32 years old at the time. Now let's get into this couple real quick. Brooke and Will have been together for some years, and they were living together at the apartment for somewhere between 3 to 5 years. Apparently there have been some troubles within their relationship. There's a domestic violence report between them from 2016 when Will had pushed Brooke into a bathroom tub during an argument. He actually had to serve 30 days in jail behind that. Now they both had their own children who were estranged. Will had 3 children, while Brooke has, I believe, 7 based on my research. And they both had lengthy offenses against them, including some outstanding unpaid child support and something much more wicked that I'll get into later in this story. Now, back in 2017, Will was ready to end the relationship with Brooke because things had gotten too volatile between them. And although Will loved her dearly, he was tired of the tumultuous drama, so he broke up with her. And Brooke, realizing she was about to lose her man and not wanting to be alone, ended up telling him some really big news. She revealed to him that she was pregnant with his baby, and although already parents, this would have been their first baby together. Brooke told Will that this would be their chance to finally get the family dynamics right this time and raise their baby together in a healthy, happy environment. Will, so happy and giddy, decided, you know what, Brooke's right, this would be their chance to finally get all their ducks in a row. So he took Brooke back and began preparing for his brand new baby to arrive later in the year. So now we're coming back to August. It's the 19th day of the month. We're still in 2017. It's Saturday afternoon, and Brooke asked her downstairs neighbor, Savannah, to come upstairs to her apartment so Savannah could model a dress that Brooke had been making. And she offered Savannah $20 to do it. Now, the two didn't have a friendship amongst each other, much less an acquaintanceship. They were really just passerbys, two people who recognized each other from residing in the same place, so it really wasn't the norm for Brooke to even speak to Savannah about anything, really. Nonetheless, Savannah figured it wouldn't be of any harm to her to help out a neighbor, and it was approximately 1:30 p.m., shortly after ordering some pizza for her household, when Savannah went upstairs to Brooke's apartment. However, some time had gone by, and her family realized that Savannah still hadn't come back home. She was supposed to take her 16-year-old brother to work shortly before 3 p.m., so her mom sent the little brother upstairs to Brooke's apartment to look for Savannah around 2:30 p.m., but when he knocked, no one answered, so he went back down to his apartment. Then Savannah's father followed up and went upstairs looking for her as well. This time, Brooke answered the door but told Savannah's father that she couldn't come to the door because Savannah was still trying the dress on. So he left and went back downstairs. Since the little brother had to get to work, the mom, Norberta, took the brother to work herself. A few more hours passed and Savannah still hadn't shown up at home, so the family went back up to Brooke's apartment to look for her. But now, Brooke told Norberta that Savannah had already left, which Norberta found strange because Savannah's car had still been sitting outside. Plus, her ankles were so swollen from being pregnant, she couldn't have walked off somewhere that far, and she never went back home to eat the pizza that she ordered. So where could Savannah have gone? The last record of any communication from Savannah is when she sent a text to her mother and boyfriend Ashton, telling them how she ordered the pizza and was going upstairs to Brooke's house to help her with the dress fitting, but after that, nothing. Even when Norberta was blowing up her phone, Savannah never responded, which was completely out of character for Savannah, especially since she was always on her phone, whether she was texting or posting on social media. So now at this point, everyone is terrified, and Ashton was freaking out. His girlfriend and unborn baby were unaccounted for, and they had just signed a lease for another apartment in North Fargo and planned to move there on September 1st of 2017, so they could have a space for the little family that they were building. Her entire family was on it though. They put a missing persons report out for Savannah in hopes of finding the very pregnant 22-year-old. The media picked up on the story and it had been circulating rapidly, with everyone on edge, wondering what happened to Savannah and praying that her and her unborn baby girl were okay. Over 100 people rallied together in the search of Savannah and her unborn over that weekend. Police asked residents to look everywhere: dumpsters, fenced areas, wooded areas, everywhere. Now, naturally, as investigators have to do their job, they asked questions to the last person that saw Savannah, which was her neighbor Brooke, and they asked to take a look around her apartment, which Brooke allowed, and everything checked out just fine. No evidence of any wrongdoing, no strange behavior coming from Brooke, or anything seemingly out of place to make investigators feel like Brooke had anything to do with Savannah's disappearance. But they didn't only check once or twice, they actually did a search throughout Brooke's apartment 3 different times that whole weekend. Twice on the day of Savannah's disappearance and once the next day after. Now, in the midst of all this, a couple days after Savannah's disappearance, Brooke's boyfriend Will was bragging to his coworkers about how Brooke finally gave birth to their baby girl, who they named Phoenix. Now, keep that in your back pocket and let's leap into August 22nd, 2017. During the late hours of the evening / early hours of the morning, Brooke's boyfriend Will was stopped by police outside of their apartment for an outstanding $300 warrant for something else unrelated to the disappearance of Savannah. They picked him up and took him to the precinct. And here's where detectives Nick Jonas and Joshua Luce decided to ask him questions, but not about his warrant. They just used the warrant as bait to bring him in. They wanted to know if he knew anything about Savannah's disappearance, despite finding nothing in Brooke's home just days before. The detectives asked Will what his weekend consisted of, and Will broke down what he did on each day. He explained that on Friday he went to work, Saturday he went to work late and didn't stay the whole day and was dropped off at home at about 2 or 2:30 p.m. by coworkers. And on Sunday he just chilled, took a walk around the neighborhood, but other than that he was just at home chilling. But to go back to Saturday, which is when Savannah went missing, Will said when he got home on Saturday, Brooke said hello to him and introduced him to Savannah. He said he greeted Savannah, went into the bedroom, got undressed from his day and started his shower. He said he then heard a knock on the door and it was Savannah's dad. He claimed he couldn't really make out what was being said because he had the bathtub water running and he didn't answer the door himself because he was half naked. He said he then heard a knock on the door and it was Savannah's dad. He claimed he couldn't really make out what was being said because he had the bathtub water running in, and he didn't answer the door himself because he was half naked. Brooke had been the one to answer the door. He said Brooke told Savannah's father that she had already left her home a while before he came knocking, and she wouldn't know where she was at that point. Will further explained to investigators that when he was done with his shower, he went to the store and was running some errands, and when he got back, Savannah's family was back upstairs speaking to Brooke. He described it as though he couldn't even get past them and into the door without having to say excuse me in order to get past the people standing there because they were crowding the doorway interrogating Brooke. The detectives asked Will what Brooke and Savannah were doing when he got in the house that Saturday, and Will said they were in the living room doing a dress fitting. Detectives then threw something out into the atmosphere to see if it would stick and asked Will about weed smoking. They asked him if either he or Brooke smoked weed, and Will said he can't afford to smoke weed and Brooke better not be smoking no weed because he spends all his money on bills. They told Will they were asking him that because someone told them that Brooke once went downstairs to knock on Savannah's door and ask her if she wanted to smoke a joint with her. They asked Will if he thinks that sounded like something Brooke would do, and Will said no immediately. They asked Will why he believed Brooke wouldn't have done that. Is it because she'd rather smoke out of a bong instead of a joint? And Will said no, it's because Brooke is a misanthropist, and if you don't know what that means, it's to have a hatred of humankind. When he answers this way, there's a shift in the room, and Will realizes he might have said something wrong. So he switches up his response a little, and he's like, well, maybe she did go down there and offer to smoke. I don't know, but isn't the woman pregnant? And the detectives are like, yeah, she's about 8 months pregnant. And Will is like, well, then I don't think she would offer a pregnant woman something to smoke. Basically, it was a characteristic question, and I don't think Will's response helped at all. But anyway, the detectives go back to that Saturday and ask him how long was he taking a shower for. Instead of answering the question straightforward, Will decides to volunteer information that Brooke got into the shower with him. They ask him if that's normal for them to shower together, and Will said yeah. They asked him if he's ever intimate with Brooke in the shower, and Will answers yes, but not that day, which was odd because why point out that you guys didn't get intimate that day when they didn't ask you about that day in particular? It was just a general question. And if you're listening to this wondering what's up with all these questions and details that seem irrelevant, it's actually very significant because investigators will dance around circles to see how you say things and what information you're willing to give that they can use against you, hence your right to remain silent. But let's move on. Detectives continue to ask questions, and Will's body language continued to shift and slouch, indicating frustration. They asked Will what he was doing the day he was picked up for the $300 warrant, and Will told them he went shopping at Walmart, but couldn't really remember what he went there for other than some new roofing shoes for work because his shoes had holes in them. However, as he was answering this question, he kept shifting back and forth, shuffling his feet, looking on the ground, trying to find the answers when you shouldn't be trying to find anything if you're being honest. But at that point, investigators got all they wanted from Will and allowed him to leave. Now, remember I told you how Will went bragging about welcoming a new baby girl with Brooke to his co-workers? Well, investigators had learned about this baby announcement when they went asking questions to his co-workers shortly after their line of questioning with Will. His co-workers spoke to detectives and mentioned his new baby, which of course was odd as Will hadn't mentioned having a baby with Brooke before. And if you're wondering why would he bring up a baby, well, most new parents can't stop gushing over their new bundle of joy. So this certainly sent the antennas up on detectives' thinking caps since they knew that Savannah was very much late in her pregnancy the day she went missing. With a new hunch in their radar, on Thursday morning, August 24, 2017, a search warrant had been issued back at Brooke's apartment. However, this time she had zero time to prepare herself, and when investigators popped up, busting the door down, literally, they saw the brand new baby girl in the home with Brooke. At this point, police realized exactly what they were dealing with and went ahead with arresting Brooke immediately, and shortly after, arrested Will. They were arrested on suspicion of conspiracy to commit murder and kidnapping, being held at the Cass County Jail with a $2 million bail for each of them. The baby girl was examined at Sanford Children's Hospital before being placed in protective custody with Cass County Social Services, while Savannah's family and the investigators waited for the DNA results to come back and confirmed that the baby belonged to Savannah. Detectives brought Brooke in for questioning, and one of the detectives was Joshua Luce, the same one who was interviewing Will just a couple days before. Brooke's demeanor during this interview with detectives was surprisingly very, very calm. at first. They asked Brooke if she knew Savannah very well, and Brooke said no, she didn't know Savannah well, and that's because none of the neighbors who lived there were very social with each other. So they asked her if she knew Savannah's family very well, and Brooke said no, not really. She said she knew of who Savannah's mother was, but that's only because the mother worked at the dollar store. She said she spoke to Savannah's mother while at the dollar store more than she did at their place of residence. Investigators decided it was time to move on and asked if Brooke had any questions for them, and Brooke asked if there were any updates as to why she was even there in the first place, and the detectives explained to her that her home was still being searched at that very moment, and they were really more so interested in the baby. They pointed out how Brooke was kind of beating around the bush back at her apartment when they were asking her about the infant girl and wanted to know what was going on with the infant and why was the infant even there. Brooke stated all she knew herself was that she was asked to care for a baby, and that's what she did. She was taking care of a baby and making sure the baby was safe and healthy. That's it. Anything further than that, she should probably wait until she spoke to an attorney. The detectives asked her directly if she wanted an attorney, but Brooke didn't answer that question with a direct response and still didn't technically ask for an attorney, so they continued to question her anyway. They told her to sit tight because they'd be there for a little while, not realizing she'd never be leaving. You see, Brooke was never actually pregnant. Remember when I told you in January of 2017 she told Will how she was pregnant and that's why they should give their love another try? Well, that was just a desperate attempt on her end that worked in her favor of getting her man back. Unfortunately, as time went on, the heat was on too, and Brooke knew she'd have to be able to produce a child to keep the charade up and keep her man. This is when she hatched the idea of stealing a baby. So what role did Will play in all of this, since he was initially kept in the dark about this botched plan? Well, in the meantime of Brooke being held in the interview room, Will was being questioned in the other room, but this time detectives spoke to him with a jig is up approach. The same detectives who interviewed him before let him know that the search warrant at the apartment was taking place and they've already spoken to Brooke. They asked him straight up, like, what do you need to tell us? They expressed their concern for Savannah's safety and just needed more clarity on what exactly happened, trying to get Will to sympathize and cough up some more information. Will became a bit apprehensive, saying he realized that this entire situation isn't going to be any good for him no matter what, and he knew he wouldn't be going home. This shows some defeat in his demeanor, which showed detectives they were on the right path and they just needed to break him down a little more. So they directly asked Will if the baby girl that was found with Brooke is Savannah's baby, and Will said he wasn't sure whose baby it was. Now, remember I told you earlier about Will being home that Saturday of Savannah's disappearance, and he said he was in the bathroom when Savannah's dad came knocking on the door? Well, in that instance, he didn't exactly lie. He was in the bathroom, but what he didn't say is how Savannah was actually there as well. However, she was placed in the bathtub, bloodied, severed, and dead, with the baby removed from her womb, while her father was at the door asking about his missing daughter. Brooke had killed Savannah and stole her baby. Now, Will actually walked in on the crime that Brooke had already committed, but instead of him seeking help and calling the authorities, he assisted Brooke in carrying out this sick, wicked charade. And remember I told you earlier how shifty his body language was when speaking on what he bought from Walmart the day he was brought in for questioning? Well, he left out the part where he and Brooke bought baby diapers for the baby that Brooke had just freshly ripped out of Savannah's body. Had Will told the detectives about the diapers, that right there would have told investigators everything they needed to know about Savannah missing. And we'll get to the point of when all these details have finally emerged, but in the meantime, I'll continue with the interrogation portion of this story. Just keep in mind how calm and matter-of-factly Brooke's demeanor was during the interrogation, although she knew exactly what she had done. So Will tells the detectives he doesn't know whose baby it was that Brooke had in the apartment with them, and he became visibly upset, saying how his life was pretty much over at that point. Detectives asked him if he knew whether or not Savannah was at the residency where they all lived, and Will became irritated, saying if she was there, they would have found her already. They asked Will, well, how come you didn't tell us anything about the baby when we spoke to you before? Will said he was simply covering his own ass. Now, this is when Will reveals that he was under the impression that Brooke had been pregnant all this time. He said he knew Brooke had tied her tubes at one point, but that he learned the tubes can be untied, so he assumed she was telling the truth about being pregnant. He said Brooke was even behaving as though she was afraid that their baby would be removed from their care because of Will's past felony conviction for child abuse. So back in 2012, when one of Will's children was a baby, he fractured the baby's skull, claiming it was an accident accident because he supposedly placed the baby down too hard, which in my opinion is such bullshit, because what type of hard surface did you place the baby down on so damn hard that the skull just so happened to be fractured? But anyway, he pled guilty to the charges to avoid a 10-year jail sentence. So the detectives asked Will if he believed that Brooke was really pregnant, and Will says he wasn't sure, but he knew at some point she would have had to produce a baby. He was becoming increasingly antsy and frustrated, especially when they asked him when he saw the baby for the first time. Will said he couldn't answer that question and went on to express his loyalty to Brooke and how he promised to have her back until the end. The detectives told him they wanted him to give his side to try and avoid being railroaded, trying to manipulate him into spilling the beans. They told him, like, look, you have no idea what Brooke is over there saying in that other room and how people change when they're in that room talking to the investigators. Further into Will's interrogation, he expresses how much he did want to start a family with Brooke and possibly start over and do the family thing the right way this time. They asked Will where was the baby when the apartment was being searched, and he told them the baby was in a makeshift bed that Brooke created out of a suitcase, which speaks to the negligence of the police department, because how is it that they searched that apartment several times and never found the baby? But at this point in the interrogation, police still didn't know where Savannah was. The conversation between detectives and Will does reach a turning point when Will changes up his story. Initially, he said on the Saturday that Savannah went missing, he came home, took a shower with Brooke, and they just chill, right? But then he told detectives that when he came home that Saturday, he saw Brooke with the baby and a bloody mess all over the floor. He said when he got home, Brooke told him, quote unquote, "This is our baby, this is our family." He said they took all the items they used to clean up and all the bloody evidence in trash bags to some random dumpsters in an apartment complex on the other side of town in West Fargo. The detectives were still trying to get Will to tell them if he knew where Savannah was, but he still didn't budge on providing any location details. At this point, detectives go back to the room where Brooke was and hone in on her to see what they can get out of her at this point. Will was smart when he told detectives he knew they were just going to go back and forth between them to compare their stories, and I'm glad he knew this because this story is sick. Anyway, soon as detectives came back into the room where Brooke was, the first thing she asked was, quote unquote, "What charges am I looking at for having that baby in my possession?" Detectives explained to her they weren't able to answer that as of yet because they still needed to put the pieces together of what Will stated, what they found at Brooke's apartment, and whatever the prosecutors will want to do after that. Brooke seemed irritated and adamant that there's nothing in her apartment to find. The detectives kept putting emphasis on Will saying something to them concerning this case, as if they wanted her to inquire what it was that Will said, or as though they wanted to prompt her to start speaking her side of things, and it worked because she went on to explain how she even crossed paths with Savannah in the first place. Brooke stated she met Savannah several weeks prior to what happened and claimed that Savannah was unhappy with her life and her family at home, and she was even unhappy with the thought of becoming a mom, which is different from what she had said earlier in the interview. She was sitting there lying to detectives trying to create a story when she already said she never spoke to Savannah before because everyone was antisocial where they lived. But anyway, Brooke went on to say Savannah told her that she just wanted to get away from everything and everyone. So she allegedly took it upon herself to help Savannah do that and was expecting for Savannah to come back for her baby. Brooke was very concerned with what was going to happen to her because she went on to ask the detectives again about the potential charges she was facing at that point, but detectives weren't about to let her skate past that specific Saturday. So they asked her to tell them about the specific details of what happened that Saturday from her recollection. Brooke stated she told Savannah that she could help her with inducing her labor and breaking her water. That way she could get away without the baby for a few days, but that she had to come back for the baby. She said once Savannah hadn't come back, she figured she just raised the baby as her own. She didn't say she called Child Protective Services. She didn't tell the family downstairs to come get their baby relative. She didn't call the authorities. She just figured she raised the baby on her own. And at this point in my research, I'm thinking to myself, like, this woman had to know how stupid she sounded because she was just going to keep going on with this charade for the time being. The detectives asked Brooke if she had actually helped deliver Savannah's baby. She said she didn't. She said Savannah left that Saturday and didn't come come back until around Sunday in the wee hours of the morning, about 3:30 in the morning, and that's when she took the baby from Savannah. Savannah left, and that was it. Detectives asked her if Savannah reached out to her at any point via text or call, and Brooke said no because Savannah didn't have her number. She just knew where she lived. She said the only reason she knew Savannah was downstairs outside of their complex at that time in the morning is because she looked out her window and saw Savannah standing there. Detectives asked her, well, how did you know to look out the window at that time, and how would Savannah have known that you would have saw her? And Brooke said because she was up, and she's always up just looking out the window because she never goes anywhere or does anything. Pretty much she's a homebody. Detectives tell her they're still confused about Savannah supposedly having this baby at some point, and Brooke says she wouldn't know anything about that because Savannah left her apartment. Keep in mind though, the detectives have yet to mention how Will already told them he came home that Saturday to a baby in the house and blood all over the floor, and he told them he believed Brooke used some midwife skills to help Savannah, although never divulging what midwife skills exactly entailed of. Now, detectives asked Brooke how she guided Savannah in having her baby, and Brooke told them that she advised Savannah to break her own water so she can go into labor. She said she told Savannah to use a shish kebab stick to insert into her vagina and up to her cervix so she can break her own water that way. Now, at this point, Brooke apologized to the detectives for withholding the truth from them from earlier, but this the whole truth and nothing but the truth, and even said that that's why there was no baby in her apartment on Saturday or Sunday when the police came and did their searches, because she didn't have the baby in her home at the time of the searches. She was sure to emphasize how police were there at her house looking and found no baby because there was quote unquote no baby there, which speaks volumes to the piss poor job that police did searching her apartment, and the department should be embarrassed about that, honestly. Nonetheless, whole time Brooke is saying all this, she still isn't even knowing how Will already told the detectives how the baby was in their apartment all those days in the makeshift bed that Brooke made out of a suitcase. At this point, detectives are fed up. They're like, all right, look, the jig is up. We know you lying because we spoke to Will. There's evidence plus a timeline that you cannot deny. Brooke, now highly agitated, started to raise her voice at them because she clearly wants them to believe her lie, and she claimed that, well, Will wouldn't have known much about what happened anyways because she didn't let him know anything and she kept him out of what was going on. The detectives didn't believe her when she said that she had went outside 3 a.m. that Monday morning to meet Savannah because they pointed out how the apartment complex was under surveillance, so she would have been recorded with Savannah. But what's crazy is Brooke didn't lie. She didn't lie about being outside at 3 a.m. and she was with Savannah, but not in the way that she's lying to the detectives about. We'll come back to that in a bit. So they asked Brooke if she ever believed that she was truly pregnant at any point, and she told them yeah, she had believed she was pregnant several months prior. But when they asked if she was pregnant right there at that time, she quickly answered no with much certainty. But when they asked her why would Will believe she was pregnant then this whole time up until that point, and why would he have been bragging to his coworkers about just recently having a baby, this is where Brooke gets choked up and doesn't know which way to go with her lie and completely acts lost, like she wasn't sure why Will would have gone around bragging about having a baby girl. She went from knowing she wasn't pregnant to not knowing if she was pregnant to saying she felt sick at one point and it was a possibility she was pregnant, and she knew she should have had a baby already but realized she wasn't pregnant because there was no sign of such. At this point in the interrogation, Brooke was cracking and the holes in her story were getting bigger. She claimed she had no malicious intent on making Will believe that she was pregnant. She then goes back into this mode of trying to seem like she's heaven sent for this baby because she had the audacity to bring God into it, saying maybe this situation with Savannah's baby was like God sent because it happened right around the time of her quote unquote finding out that she was never pregnant. Detectives told Brooke straight up how they found it real coincidental that right around the time her and Will would be so excited about welcoming a baby girl, her pregnant neighbor downstairs who is due to have a baby girl goes missing and her baby ends up with them. Brooke says she knows it sounds wild, but that's how it happened, and she never brought any harm to Savannah nor her baby. Brooke went down the timeline of that Saturday's events again, making the story seem impossible for her to have harmed Savannah, take the baby, and clean up all within 3 hours. And even for me, if I wasn't doing research on this and knew the facts of this case, I too probably would have been convinced that it would have been impossible for these things to have happened that way. But it did, because let's not forget Brooke had help from Will. The detectives went on to ask her a bunch of what if questions. What if Savannah is found dead? What if any biological DNA shows up, like blood from Savannah? And Brooke is like, well, the family used to live in my apartment before I moved in there, so if there's blood there, that's where it would be from. But this question was just a tactic from the detectives to trip Brooke up, because there was never any blood found in Brooke's apartment, which is astounding considering what really happened. Brooke and Will clearly did an impeccable job cleaning up Brooke's mess. Detectives asked Brooke to just tell them, what did Will walk into when he came home that Saturday? They said because Will told them one thing and she was telling them something different. And Brooke said it with a straight face, like, look, I don't know what he told you, but I'm telling you, I didn't have possession of that baby until Monday. They asked her again, like, okay, so you're telling us Will didn't see a baby in your arms on Saturday? And Brooke just kept on vehemently denying that. They didn't let up on drilling her with questions. And then Brooke told them she's basically only guilty of taking advantage of a pregnant, disgruntled girl because she convinced Savannah to give birth on her own and come bring the baby to her. Once again, shifting the motive here. She started off saying how Savannah just ambushed her into taking the baby, and then it was like a blessing and God sent that the baby just so happened to end up with her. Now it's like, oh, I took advantage of her weak moment and convinced her to give me the baby for my own selfish reasons. Yet, still denying that she did anything harmful to Savannah, whilst knowing exactly what she did. Detectives then let her know that their forensics went searching through her internet history and began naming all the weird things she searched that would coincide with her removing Savannah's baby, and even how to set up a noose. Brooke once again got defensive and began raising her voice because she tried to say all her searches were months before Savannah even moved into the complex. But when the detectives told her the dates were just a few days before Savannah's disappearance, she lied and said she never searched those things. At this point, detectives are aggravated with Brooke and her lies. They start getting more assertive, telling her how Will already exposed the truth and told the story. They told her how they knew she lied to Will about being pregnant, and that's why she even stole Savannah's baby in the first place to try and keep Will. They told her exactly what they knew it was, and she denied it all. Once they mentioned the bloody towels that Will threw away, Brooke finally buckled and said directly that she wanted a lawyer. They handcuffed her and took her to the county jail. Now, remember when I told you that Brooke actually had been with Savannah that Monday early dawn, 3 a.m. after Savannah went missing? But it wasn't in the way that she was lying about to the police. Well, you see, Brooke did go out into the complex and searched around the premises, but that was to make sure that nobody was outside, because she did have Savannah with her, but it was Savannah's deceased body with her. And not only her, but Will was present as well. They went out that morning to dispose of Savannah. They put Savannah's body in a dresser and nailed the drawers shut so that it wouldn't open and expose the body. Before Will brought the dresser outside, they had the dresser hidden in a bathroom closet, which again, police overlooked during their search of Brooke's apartment that whole weekend. It's shameful. Once the couple realized the coast was clear, they put the dresser in their Jeep and drove over to a bridge near the Red River and tossed the dresser into the river. The whole time, Savannah's baby was with them and they went unnoticed. They carried the baby in a book bag. After sending Brooke off to jail, detectives decided it would be worth going back to Will and talking to him one more time to try and pry the truth out of him. Unfortunately, they failed. Will said he was freezing and probably in shock and starving, so he didn't want to speak anymore. At that point, he too was taken to county jail, and detectives still didn't have a location for Savannah. And it wasn't until Sunday, August 27th, 2017, after 8 days of searching at about 8:20 p.m., when two kayakers were in the river and made the discovery of Savannah's body wrapped in plastic and duct tape stuck to a tree underwater not too far from where her body was discarded. Her body was positively identified by 9:30 p.m. and was brought to the Ramsey County Medical Examiner for an autopsy. But it didn't reveal specific details on how Savannah was murdered, but they did rule her death a homicide. Brooke decided to somewhat come clean at Will's trial while testifying. And I say somewhat because she still threw Will under the bus instead of taking full accountability for the actions she took that even put them both in this scenario. Her attorney, Steve Mottinger, said, quote unquote. Ms. Cruz early on indicated that she wanted to take responsibility for her actions. From where I stand, she took responsibility today by entering a guilty plea to the 3 charges. In December of 2017, Brooke pled guilty to conspiring to murdering Savannah, conspiring to kidnap the baby, and giving false information to law enforcement, according to the documents in Cass County District Court.
A North Dakota woman pleaded guilty Monday in the killing of a pregnant neighbor so she and her boyfriend could keep the baby. Brooke Cruz could face life in prison after pleading guilty to conspiracy to commit kidnapping and murder in the death of 22-year-old Savannah Greywind of Fargo. Cruz's boyfriend, William Hone, pled not guilty to conspiracy to commit kidnapping and murder. Greywind was 8 months pregnant when she disappeared in August. Kayakers found her body wrapped in plastic in a river. The baby was found alive in the apartment Cruz shared with her 32-year-old boyfriend, William Hone. Cruz didn't offer any details on how Greywind was killed. Authorities haven't said either, but Fargo Police Chief Dave Todd has said her death was a cruel and vicious act of depravity.
At this time, Will pled guilty to kidnapping and providing false information to law enforcement, but not guilty on the charge of conspiracy to commit murder, which carried a life sentence. Brooke told the court during Will's trial that she had told Will a while ago about her faking her pregnancy, but he threatened her and told her that she had better produce a baby for him. The detectives didn't lie when they said you'd be surprised how people switch up, because Brooke literally threw Will under the bus at his sentencing. Brooke said that Will caught on to the faux pregnancy stunt long before Savannah's murder. She said he allegedly told her that she needed to find a way to produce a baby for him, and she also claimed that once Will saw how far along Savannah was in her pregnancy, that he was the one who told her that they needed to take Savannah's baby. And at this point in my research, I'm thinking to myself, why would Will be the one to come up with this plan if he's the one who wanted out of the relationship at the top of 2017, and he only stayed because he assumed Brooke was pregnant? I personally believe that Brooke was lying about that, because it would make more sense that once Will would have found out Brooke wasn't pregnant, then he really would have been done with her, not trying to make her steal a woman's baby right out of her body. But anyway, Brooke claimed that she and Savannah got into a fight and she pushed Savannah, which caused Savannah to hit her head on the bathroom sink and fall. And I call bullshit on this as well, because court witnesses say there was no head trauma present on Savannah. However, Brooke claimed once Savannah fell, she went and got a knife from somewhere in the home and started cutting the baby out of Savannah's body. She said Savannah woke up in the middle of her cutting Savannah's stomach, but Brooke didn't care. She didn't stop. She just reached her arms into Savannah's body, grabbed the baby girl, and pulled her out. She said this was when Will walked in. He grabbed a rope and pulled it tight around Savannah's neck and allegedly told Brooke, quote unquote, if she wasn't dead before, she is now. And even that sounds funny because it was in Brooke's internet search on how to make a noose. So unless Will was sitting there looking it up on her internet. But anyway, Brooke says she and Will never spoke explicitly about taking Savannah and killing her or kidnapping the baby, but with Will allegedly pressuring her into producing a newborn to call their own, Brooke said she received that as though it didn't matter how she got the baby, he just wanted her to get a baby. Imagine that. Imagine assuming your best bet was to kidnap a pregnant woman, kill her, and steal her baby instead of, adopting, surrogacy, IVF, all the other options, upon options she could have utilized besides the sick, wicked, evil plot that she came up with all on her own. Now, I want to briefly dive into Brooke's past a bit because it's pretty wicked and it coincides with the crime she committed. You see, Brooke had a thing for murder and babies. She actually kept a journal with all kinds of weird notes in there similar to her internet searches. First of all, Brooke was a married woman at one point. Before her relationship with Will, she actually attacked her then husband with a knife. Not sure if she sliced or stabbed him though, because that wasn't clear in the articles I read, only that she attacked him. Now in this journal, Brooke had written notes on how to deliver babies at home and what brings on abortions forcefully. And not only that, but in the year of 2016, a woman named Roxanne Cartwright was visiting a Fargo, North Dakota restaurant with her family, which consisted of her husband, their 4 sons, and a brand new baby girl who they had just finished finalizing an adoption for in the state of Arkansas. While at the restaurant, Brooke had approached Roxanne's family, zeroing in on the baby girl while someone was holding the baby. Roxanne said Brooke looked at the baby and approached the baby as if she wanted to hold her and said, quote unquote, that's exactly what I want. One of Roxanne's sons said to to Brooke that the baby was his sister and her name was Sophia, like in an innocent way, not realizing what was going on. Then Brooke said, quote unquote, yeah, that's the name. That's exactly what I want. Roxanne said it made her feel uneasy, so she took the baby and pretended to breastfeed her, hoping it would make Brooke leave them alone. But instead, Brooke just stood there, staring, until she finally walked off. So when Roxanne saw Brooke on the news regarding Savannah's case, she said the hairs on her arms stood up, and she absolutely knew it was true what she did, based on their brief, peculiar encounter. Brooke also has a long history of aggression, based on outside accounts of her personality. Brooke's cellmate spoke during sentencing and even said that Brooke confessed to her the whole story of what she did to Savannah. A former cellmate of Will's named Brian Grob testified that Will told him directly how he hid Savannah's body in a dresser and how he nailed it closed, but he did not help Brooke kill her. However, Brian did say that when he talked about the difficulty he had with an ex-girlfriend's abortion, allegedly Will told him, quote unquote, well, I would have just cut the baby out the bitch. Yikes. Will was acquitted of conspiracy to commit murder charges, and he was sentenced to 20 years in May of 2018. Brooke was sentenced to life without parole. Before her sentencing, Brooke apologized to Savannah's family while crying, saying that she wished she hadn't done this. She said, quote, there's no excuse, no rationalization. There's nothing. I'm guilty and I deserve every year I get. I know it doesn't help, but I'm sorry, end quote.
Prison without parole for conspiracy to commit murder. Brooke Cruz also faces an additional 20 years in prison for conspiracy to commit kidnapping and giving false information to law enforcement. Inside the courtroom, we learned gruesome new details on how Savannah was killed. Valley News Team's Christine Stanwood was there, and she joins us live now. Christine?
Andrea, an emotional day inside the Cass County Courthouse as supporters of SAVANNA-GREYWIND filled the room eager to hear the judge's decision. But before the judge sentenced Cruz, we heard emotional testimony from both sides.
This is who she is as we sit here today, a cold-blooded killer.
The prosecution detailed graphic details behind SAVANNA-GREYWIND's murder. First, that Cruz admitted to luring Savannah into her apartment with the intention of taking Savannah's baby.
I did cut her, and then I took her baby out of her. She was not dead when I cut her and took her baby out of her. I then performed a crude C-section without the benefit of anesthetic.
We also learned that during the search of Savannah, Cruz went out in public with the baby.
Cruz admitted she brought the baby to Walmart late at night in public.
Police went back to Cruz's apartment multiple times, unknowing that Savannah was in the Red River for nearly a week.
I get so upset and angry and can't understand how or why these people could have taken my girl from me, from us. The pain of losing a child is like no other pain. I now know that pain. My heart is literally broken.
And in the final statement, Brooke Cruz spoke to the courtroom.
I am guilty, and I deserve every year I get. I just wanted them to know that I am sorry for what I did.
As for the baby girl who miraculously survived her amateur cesarean delivery and her mother's untimely death, the little girl's name is Hazley Jo, and she is doing just fine being raised by her father Ashton and the rest of Savannah's immediate family. She actually attended Brooke's sentencing with Ashton. She just turned 6 this year on August 21st, and while it is a blessing that Hazley Jo is here, alive and well, I can imagine how painful that sting is when the thought of how she got here creeps into the minds of her beloved family every birthday. Thank you, God, for the strength that you smother this family with, and I pray they continue to stay strong for baby girl Hazley. A bill in Congress was created in 2019 on behalf of Savannah to protect Native American women and girls from violence, abduction, and human trafficking. It is called the SAVANNA Act. Initially, the bill passed the Senate in December of 2018, but was reintroduced in 2019 and named the SAVANNA Act. It is also in place to improve tribal access to certain federal crime information databases and create standardized protocols for responding to cases of missing and murdered Native Americans, and an annual report that would include statistics on missing and murdered Native American women. My deepest condolences goes out to Ashton, Savannah's family, and even for baby Hazley. I wish deep in my soul that none of you had to endure this pain, especially in this way. I wish Savannah could be here in the physical to live out her familial dreams with the love of her life. May Hazley grow up to be everything Savannah dreamed of her to be. Rest in peace, Savannah LaFontaine-GREYWIND. Your spirit resides with your family, and you will never be forgotten.